And it says you are live. So we are live. It is Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. Okay, first off, no, this is not a daily drop, and those really are done. We're not like psyching you out, messing with you, or anything like that. But we wanted to come live and share something that we've been getting having a lot of conversations about and hearing a lot about, and then a lot of stuff requested about. So happy Tuesday to you. Hope you had a great long weekend. Hope you had some time to relax and just kind of re-energize. It was beautiful here in Ohio. I hope it was beautiful wherever you are. If you're listening on the podcast, this is pre-recorded. Yes, we are going to take this and throw it up as another bonus episode on Teach Better Talk. So if you're listening on the podcast, I would really appreciate a subscribe and a like and a rate and review on iTunes or anything else. That'd be awesome. But if you're not here in the Facebook group, you should get in the Facebook group. You could obviously right now we're streaming in the Facebook group, but we're also streaming on the Facebook page. We're also streaming over on Periscope with Twitter, and we're on Twitch, and we're on YouTube. So you can kind of be anywhere. So I'd love it if you're in the chat. Like if you're gonna comment, like I see right now, Bree, good morning. Adam, good morning. Libby from Cleveland, good morning. Good morning, Libby. Wherever you're at, like I can see where you're at, but I'd love it if you share with everyone else where you're at. So it looks like Bree, I think, is maybe in the group. Adam, I think maybe you're in the. You may be in the group, maybe you're on the page. Libby's coming to us on Twitter. That's awesome. I've got YouTube up here. I'm taking a look at YouTube.
Alex Valencic says they're back. He thought, I know the daily drop-ins were done.
He gave. Well, I'm pretty sure last week when we were talking about finishing the daily drop-ins, Alex is like, I give you 2 weeks or something. I can't remember what his guess was. Good morning, Alex. Good morning, Carrie. Good to see everyone. So if you are watching on YouTube, do me a favor. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like this video. Comment. Let us know that you're there on YouTube. If you're on Twitter, say hello. If you're on either the Facebook page or the Facebook group, say what's up. Obviously, if you're in the group, you need to know. You guys all know. You're already doing it. Put your name in the parentheses afterwards. Appreciate that a lot. Good morning, Carrie. Joe, what's up, my brother? He says, hey, the dynamic duo. I love it.
Megan is here.
Bree is in the group. Yep. So
Dave Schmidt, he's probably icing his legs right now.
If you're in the group, make sure you put your name at the end so we know who's commenting, just like Bree's doing. That's awesome. Dave, this is such a tease. He says, yeah. So Dave ran 33 miles yesterday
because he just decided to do an ultra.
He texted. I'm gonna out you here, Dave. He texted me last night. He's like, if I ever try to do that again, tell me I'm stupid and don't let it happen or something. I can't remember what it was. What's up? Megan says, taking you two on my run with me. Oh, I love it. You're on a run right now? Go, Megan, go.
I'm kind of jealous. I'm not going to lie.
Go faster. Anyway, I had a nice 5K yesterday. I dedicated. I gave all of it to Dave, so he doesn't have to run today. That was my plan.
Yeah, I don't think he could if he wanted to, but
Holly Stewart is here. Good morning, Holly. We're allowed to start now because Holly's here. That's kind of our rule for our webinars. We can't start till Holly gets in. Right. Adam is in the group. I think Adam is showing up. His picture shows up in the group, but I think maybe because he's one of our moderators, maybe. I'm trying to figure all this stuff up. Kaplan, what's up, Kaplan? Down in Georgia, loving it. Alex says Dave is ... Well, oh no, that's Carrie. Yeah, I know. Okay, that's exactly how we feel about Dave too. He's just wow.
D Harris on Twitter there.
Yeah, D Harris, good to see you. Don, finishing up my last week of distance learning. Woohoo! My kids are in their last week as well right now. So Holly said that's right. So one thing you did miss, and so Chad wasn't in the webinar yesterday because we've got a whole bunch of virtual workshops going on the next 2 weeks. So Chad was doing some prep yesterday for that stuff and wasn't able to get in the workshop with Hans and Jim, but it was awesome. But we did iterations like Peter Piper picked the pebble, that stuff. Like Jen explained it a lot better than me. But they were supposed to compliment us. Me, you, or Ray was the thing. So there were some good ones in there, Chad. That was one thing you didn't get from that, but there were some really good alliterations in there that were a lot of fun. And then we gave away they gave away stickers and books and stuff, so it was a lot of cool. So I'm still saying hi to everybody because everyone's jumping in. So
they were infusing award-winning culture in that webinar.
Today is an off day no matter what. I can barely move, so feel free to just share a bunch of content today. I'll consume all the things. All right, good to know. Rest up, Dave. Another rest up day from the team. Oh, the team. Oh, that's the team posting everywhere. Jeez. I love it. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started here. If you're watching, kind of what we're going for here is this was kind of sort of impromptu. We planned it a few days ago and decided to come in here. We're like, oh, we'll confuse everyone. They'll think we're doing drop-ins again. Good morning, Aaron. Good to see you. But so you've always talked about these sort of three things, but we've really kind of put them into like questions that you've been asking a lot lately. We've had these when we're talking to schools and teachers that we're working with. We've talked about it quite a bit in our admin mastermind, which happens every Tuesday. And we've gotten a lot of really great feedback from you kind of talking about these three questions that you feel like we always need to be asking in order to really drive in student success. So because we've had a lot of people asking like, hey, can you have Chad just kind of rant on those questions again? Hey, can you get Chad to just rant? Can we record that? And I'm like, hey, let's go live, have you rant, and we'll record it. So I'm literally here to just like put the quarter in and push go on Chad this morning. So we've been talking about it. It's these three questions that you feel that we would need to be asking ourselves, our district, of our teachers, of ourselves, everything to drive student success. And these make sense both when we're in physical classroom, pre-COVID, now during COVID and virtual, and when we go back, whether we go back virtually, whether we go back physically, whether we go back blended, whether we go back intermittent, in and out, and everything like that. These stand true no matter what. They're just what we should always be asking. So Chad, can you just kind of take us there with us? Like, I'm just going to kind of shut up and watch. I might interject a little bit because I like to interrupt you, but can you run through these three questions that we've been talking about? Just share with anyone who maybe hasn't done it and kind of
absolutely
what they are and how we can look at them.
Yeah, absolutely. So these three things are inherently part of mastery learning and the grid method, which we talk about all the time. These aren't new ideas, but I think COVID, I think the coronavirus, I think being locked down, social distancing, I think these things have become more important and less of an option for teachers, right? Because no one knows what they're going to be going back to. If I'm a teacher, I could be going back to a weird A-B schedule where I see half my students on Monday and half my students on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. I could be going back to a school where only 50% of my students are in the school at a time. I could be going back to a school that's all online still. That's a hybrid model. That's somewhere in between. And the truth is, for anyone listening, like, we just don't know. I don't think anyone actually has a clear picture of what school is going to look like. And that, to me, means that we have to plan for the worst case scenario so that we can experience the best case scenario. Because if you're planning for the worst, you can always scale back and adjust to bring things and make things easier for yourself. But it's a lot harder to go, I'm going to go back to exactly how I was teaching before and then have to rescale and readjust everything for online learning again. So because we don't know, the three pillars that I always talk about, and the first one I think is one of the most important, is universal access. So the first pillar is, do your students have universal access to what they need to learn and grow in your classroom? That could mean if I do a live lecture at 10 a.m. and everyone's with me, is it being recorded so students can look at it later? Are there notes and resources that are being provided so they can access them later or through different channels? If they don't have access online, can they access it via physical paper in some way, shape, or form, or something getting mailed to them? The truth is, if all of your students don't have access, you're going to set yourself up for a lot of pain, and you're not going to be able to grow your students because you're going to have subsets of your population that just can't access the information you're trying to give them. So you want to make sure that all students can access the content and curriculum that you have available. Now, Google Classroom and learning management software, Schoology, and whatever your school district uses can really help with this if there's access to technology. That allows you to post information, post recorded videos, things like that, so all students can access it as long as they have the device. If they don't have the device, we have to think about equity here, right? And we need to consider, how do we give access to the students that don't have that device at home, or whether they're in the school or not. So if you have this in place where a student can access what you did in class later, or maybe even earlier than when you planned on them getting the message or getting the content, that can easily allow them to thrive, because you may also have students that are ready to work ahead. So maybe they access the next lesson before you're ready to provide it. So this is inherently exists within the grid method that we talk about all the time, because the entire curriculum is laid out and access is provided to the students. But if teachers have not already thought about this, think about how to make your curriculum, your content, and the learning opportunities you're providing students universally accessible so that they can be successful. So that's the first pillar. Sorry, a bunch of people are coming in.
Yeah, they're just saying hello and stuff. So you're good. You can.
All right, cool. I was just making sure. So the second pillar is asynchronous or self-paced learning. It is my strong opinion that the time of everyone having to do something at the same time because I said so as the teacher is quickly dying, if not already dead. All right. We need to allow students to be able to work behind where we are, work ahead of where we are, or work right with us where we expect them to be. The new environment needs to allow students to work ahead or behind of the curriculum based on their need, level of mastery, or availability. If you think about it, if there's a student who, let's say, takes care of their siblings and both parents work and there's some sort of lockdown or social distancing still going on, they will not be able to attend that live lesson. They need to be able to work behind where you think they should be. In the same breath, if a student has a bunch of time on the weekend, but not time during the week, they should be able to put in some extra work and get ahead of the curriculum at the exact same time. So the first two pillars, in my opinion, go really hand in hand. If you have a universally accessible curriculum, which means students can access the content, activities, and learning opportunities they have at any given time, and you allow them to work through those at their own pace or ahead or behind as needed, you've solved two of the biggest problems that social distancing and COVID-19 has caused us. You've also solved a lot of your basic problems that you see in a regular classroom. And Dave Schmidt just had a great point. He said, our kids are the Netflix and YouTube generation. They do not flip through cable and find the show that they want and luckily show up at the right time. We don't want to be the cable of education. That's a great comparison by Dave Schmidt, actually. We don't want to become the cable where, hey guys, tune in at 7 p.m. and hopefully you catch it. And if not, I guess you're not going to see it this week. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. Like, you don't get to learn because, sorry. We are in a consuming culture. Our students are used to consuming. Why aren't we shifting education so that they're consuming their learning in the exact same way? Because honestly, Jeff, when something breaks in my house, I YouTube it. I go find the information I need to solve the problem. Yet we demonize our students for the exact same thing. We go, why are you always on YouTube? Well, that's how they learn 90% of the things that they know. When they have car trouble, when they have this. So my question is, why aren't we leveraging this and allowing through universal access and asynchronous learning, them to experience our classrooms and our instruction the exact same way?
Hey.
So those, go ahead.
No, go. I'm going to let you keep going. But I wanted to say good morning real quick. A few people jumping in. Katie, good morning. Andrea, good morning. Mr. Horner, good morning. Eric Geis is here. And then Erin actually brought up, she said, I love this. When it comes to self-paced, how do you differentiate between primary versus high school where there's a higher level of self-awareness?
Absolutely. So we universally kind of say that the older a student is, the more independence they can have. The younger they are, the more the teacher has to intervene. So Aaron, when we're talking about primary, K through 2, or maybe even 3 through 5, usually they start to be a little more independent at that point. I've seen amazing things happen in all those grade levels. So the younger the students are, the more intervention the teacher is going to have. So if I'm dealing with a kindergartner, instead of going, here's the entire curriculum, maybe I'm only opening up, 3 blocks in my grid, or 3 sort of progressions. So you have a student that's behind, a student that's on pace, and a student that's ahead. And then you, as the teacher, are guiding what those students are doing. So instead of going, I'm ready to move on, I'm going to move myself on as the student. You, as the teacher, are going to go, you're ready to move on, so I'm going to move you to this activity now. So you can absolutely still do this in every capacity, K through 12. You just have to adjust the intervention, the scaffolding, and the amount that you're intervening in the process. Because if you go up to the other end of the scale for high school, you have students that can take an entire course almost autonomously as long as they're provided the correct resources and support when they need it. That doesn't mean the teacher's not important. They should still be checking in. They should still be answering questions, facilitating, motivating, and all these other things. But that's absolutely a way you can adjust based on how old the students are. So go ahead.
Do you see that comment? Libby's asking, what do you mean by unlock that part of the grid? So I want to make sure, so touch on, like, you're obviously going to hear us talk a lot and Chad talk a lot. Like when we talk about things, we're going to mention grid a lot. This does not mean any of this doesn't work without the grid. It absolutely does. That's just where our minds go a lot, because that's what we do a lot of work on. But so you can talk about that unlocking part of the grid. Maybe Chad talk about like in grid terminology, but then also take it out of grid terminology.
Yeah, sure.
More what that looks like.
So if you're within a grid method classroom, obviously you have your levels and you have all your assignments for the whole unit laid out. So whether you understand grid or you don't, like that's the quickest way I can explain it. So students can just work ahead or behind, and they have the entire unit to work through. If you're not a grid method teacher, so Fan of Seven said, what did I mean by unlock part of the grid? So if you think of your traditional weekly plan as an instructor, your weekly or your instructional plan across 3 or 4 days, instead of considering just going on Monday, we're doing this, on Tuesday, we're doing this, on Wednesday, we're doing this, consider opening that up to be more self-paced. So you might introduce what you were planning on Monday, and students start working on that. And then some of them are ready to start doing the next activity, while others are still on that first activity. So they would get to that next activity by showing that they've mastered whatever content you were trying to cover. For example, if I'm covering parts of the cell in a 6th, 7th grade science class, I could say, hey, we have this one lesson on parts of the cell. Once you know the parts, or you demonstrated that you understand these things, you can move on to the second part. You can have kids working on both those things at the same time. So if you're not comfortable, you're not using the grid method, you can still kind of open up your week, or even in like 3-day blocks, and allow students to kind of work through. Just make sure you're giving enough buffer time. So if you originally had a 3-day block, maybe you plan for 4 days to allow for that buffer, so those slow students can all catch up to where they need to be.
Katie says she can't wait for the grid training next week. She's alluding to the fact that we are starting next week that starts on Tuesday, on June 2nd, a 4-week, 8-part series that's 100% on building a grid with Chad. So people are asking for it. So we decided, hey, let's make Chad do 8 of these. So that's going to be really, really cool. It's going to give opportunity to not only build a grid, but also do some sharing of grids, letting Chad sort of analyze grids live and things of that nature as well. This asks, if you can elaborate on it, says, what I live is that when it comes to, I'm thinking maybe there might have been a autocorrect somewhere in there, but if you can elaborate on that, we'll try to get to that question. Libby says, hashtag grid method wannabe. So if you want to get into that grid method webinar series, that is a paid one, but it's teachbetter.com/grid webinar. Then I'll get you locked into that, and all those get recorded, so you don't only get the live, but you also get the recorded for life as well. So here we go. Here's that question. What I love is that when it comes to summer plan, and this is applicable for both remote and in-person learning, no time wasted with planning for unknown. Oh, that's Mr. Heller. What's up, Mark?
So Mark basically hit the nail on the head here. The reason I've been preaching these 3 pillars is if these are in place, just like Mark said, and he's an awesome middle-level edge principal, actually. So his staff is actually working on grids, and the work that they're doing, regardless of what the fall looks like, is applicable. So it's not like you're designing e-learning and you're designing in-class learning. You're designing learning, and then the learning is in a framework or in a on these pillars, so that it can be flexible to live and exist in either of those environments. So if you plan with these pillars in place, and the first 2 we've talked about, Jeff, are universal access and asynchronous self-paced learning. It's early. I almost just
I got them on the screen. Don't worry about it. Even if you forget, I'm adding them on the screen as we go. So you're good.
So with those 2 alone, you're already setting yourself up for success. There's a 3rd pillar I do want to talk about, though, and I think it's really, really important.
Before you go there, anyone who's watching, if you can do us a big favor right now, I see 38 eyes or so on us, but 1 little like. Can everyone just give us a quick like? I mean, it's really easy to hit the
Maybe
like
they
button.
don't.
You can do a
like
heart.
it. Maybe
You
they
can
don't like what they
laugh. You
see.
can be angry, whatever. But give us some sort of reaction. That'd be really great. If you're on Twitter, you can just tap the screen and it'll give us hearts. But I don't like the one like. That doesn't seem legit. I think that's false. So anyway, sorry, that had nothing to do with anything. But I thought, okay, we're at 4.
Hey, we got 4.
That's still pretty weak. But let's see who else can get in here and stuff. Carrie says, great example of a flipped classroom. Yeah, if you're answering these questions, like your flipped classrooms becomes like it's you have to have this in place in order for the flipped classroom to work because it's
absolutely
just, yeah, which is why it works so well for distance learning, but still works when you're physical, which is why it makes sense.
Right, yeah. Absolutely.
All right, so number 3, go ahead, Chad.
So
we'll get some likes, we can move on.
The third pillar is focused purely on feedback, grading, and reporting. And that is, if you have not already made the shift to mastery or standards-based grading, now is the time. Like, it does not make any sense to line up 10 assignments, assign an arbitrary point value to each of them, and go, did you do all your stuff? Then you get all your points. It just simply doesn't make sense. If a student can show that they've mastered a concept, it shouldn't matter if they've done 1,000 worksheets or 2. It just matters that they've mastered the content. So we need to shift our grading to be more holistic, growth-oriented, and mastery-focused. So the 3 pillars, just to review, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this grading, but if students are working at their own pace, if they have universal access to the curriculum, and you're giving holistic mastery-based feedback, you're opening up your classroom. You're allowing students to thrive, and you're focusing on their growth. And we've seen students across the country in regular classrooms thriving this way, but we've also seen students right now in the midst of a crisis thriving because we get emails and texts almost every day that students are able to thrive and the teacher didn't have to adjust a whole lot because they already had the pieces in place.
I gotta give a couple of shout outs before we get going here. You're getting a bunch of amens right now, dude. Like, so you're doing something right. But morning to Carrie, to Kyle, name is chiming in. Heidi's here, Tim's here. But you got some. We love your amen. We got amen. Preach it, Chad. Tim's agreeing. Stop using grades as wages. We got some Lovitz coming in. Grids are SBG, and I love this. Grids and SBG are game changers, transformative teacher. But I did have a question come through that I want to have you do. Well, first off, Carrie says, preach it louder for those in the back. Mastery and learning, not working for points. Heidi's asking, and this is one I think a lot of people are struggling with. So I love getting your thoughts on this because it's slightly off, but topic, but still really important right now. My struggle is, how do I give instruction to distance learning to students who don't have internet access?
So it depends on your exact situation, right? So if you're talking about right now when everything's shut down, you're going to have to convert to some sort of universal access that's either paper-based or maybe a lot of districts are working on providing internet access in some way, shape, or form. So there are logistics and equity issues that can absolutely impact this. And these pillars of instruction may depend on some of those equity issues being solved or worked around. Just because you're designing your instruction a certain way doesn't mean that a student automatically gets access to internet. So if I put everything on Google Classroom, but none of my students have internet, I haven't done them any good, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to, and this actually comes back to something I preach all the time. Plan for the classroom, the learners, and the environment you have, not the one you want.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is where that universal access could mean different things. It doesn't just mean shove everything on Google Classroom. It could mean that, but maybe it means, hey, you're going to have to put together a really creative send home packet or some sort of weekly form of questions or projects or hands-on activities for your students to do. And that might look a lot different for you if your students don't have internet access than if you do have internet access and your students can access that content. So that comes back to the universal access to the content. What that means to you and your students is going to look very, very different. But you need to make sure that your students can access the contents. Now, when we go back if you have the ability to be with your students at any form of time, you have to utilize that time to give them that access to the content.
Mm-hmm.
So that means you're going to have to adjust your instruction a bit so that maybe you're more focused on delivery of the content in the classroom, and then you're focused on supportive and scaffolded learning opportunities as they take them home from the classroom. If there's like a mixed kind of half and half hybrid model when we go back in August. So there's not a single answer to that question, but it's really just about plan for the classroom you have and the students you have, not the ones that you want or that you hope for. And that's universally good advice for any teacher anywhere.
Agreed. I do want to note a comment. Our buddy Maurice is in here. If you don't know Maurice F. Martin, he's actually one of the newest additions to the Teach Better Speakers Network. But Maurice comes from the addiction group counseling world and speaking motivation as well. And he notes that he's been watching the whole time. And he said, coming from the addiction group counseling world, your 3 points still apply to that world on how you're educating them and working with them the same way. So I love that. I love that. I love when we find these things that what we preach that fall into other worlds that we aren't technically in. You know, we're in education, that they fall into business, they fall into different worlds like that. So anyway, just wanted to note that.
So that's actually a great point, though, and it's actually a good, if you want to step back from just like the classroom scope. So Maurice did a really good job here of bringing up the idea that like overcoming addiction is a huge process, right? Learning is a huge process. Expecting us to be able to drag anyone when they are not ready through a process makes zero sense. So if I go to a student who doesn't understand basic math and ask them to do calculus, it's a useless effort. If I go to an addict who isn't ready to recover or isn't at a certain point in that process, Maurice, I'm sorry if I'm butchering like how this process works. But if I go to them and they're not ready to take the advice or take the step, I need to meet them where they're at.
Yep.
So regardless of what you're talking about, learning guitar, learning to swim, learning to walk, teaching math, teaching science, teaching English, it doesn't necessarily matter what the context is. Learning occurs at the pace of the learner, not the pace of the instructor. So you can't force mastery if mastery is not there. So we have to foster environments using these 3 pillars to foster mastery and keep everyone in what we call their zone of proximal development. And what that is, and if you're a teacher, you probably haven't heard that term since your college classes, your college 101 education classes, but that's Vygotsky. And that means that a student is in the perfect ability level, or a person is in the perfect level to grow without being beyond their ability or bored because you're making it too easy for them. So we want to keep all our students in that zone as much as possible. And if these 3 pillars are in place, you will absolutely keep every student in their zone of proximal development all the time, which is why we see so much success.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Heidi says, thank you. Still working on that universally accessible piece. Heidi, reach out if you need any help. Let us know so we can get there. So ZPD is totally coming back, says Aaron. Maurice says, nope, you said it perfectly. You must meet people where they are and then work with them to true pace that they are at. If I treat every patient exactly the same, I make them into a number and miss out on a chance to teach the entire person. Not to mention, you're going to be really ineffective, right? Because like you said, if you're trying to teach someone to if you're in step 12 and they're in step 2, I don't know if you use steps or not, Maurice. You know what I mean? Like that's such a long, you're going to miss. And it's the same thing. It's really cool how it relates. And transfers, we talk about this all the time, Chad. Transfers over to any business anywhere too. Like that's how they learn in businesses, right? You scaffold their learning. You start them off on the basics and then you teach them more things and they don't move on. So I think it's really important there. So Joe says, I'm learning this now as I'm slowly trying to teach my son to ride his bike. Exactly. If he takes training wheels off on day 1, he's probably going to fall. He doesn't even know how to get on the bike yet, right? Eric says, how do you think the biggest concern with the student without internet is not being able to provide timely feedback? Feedback's going to be slowed down. Chad, what do you got to say on that?
Yeah, so this is a really important time to revisit our feedback with that 3rd pillar that I talked about. So, Eric, it's a huge concern that if students don't have internet, you can't give them feedback on something they assigned, right? But maybe you have weekly meetings with students. So instead of needing to provide feedback on 10 assignments for a week, maybe you're having a quick 30-second to 60-second conversation with a student where they're answering a bigger question or a more in-depth question. So instead of saying, I need to give you feedback on these 5 things, maybe you say, hey, could you explain how this math process works? How do you think about when you solve these types of problems? Now, through that conversation, I'm actually assessing the student, but I'm also teaching the student at the exact same time, because now we're having a productive conversation. So that really, we have to reframe what feedback is. But 2 things it cannot ever be, in my opinion, is punitive or detrimental to their success. So like a student should never feel like they can't succeed now because they've received feedback or a grade on something. And I see that in classrooms all the time. I got an F, I can't pass, I'm not going to do work. Like at that point, the feedback you provided is hurting the student's motivation, it's hurting the student's growth, right? And it should never be punitive. We should never, like, the thing I will go toe to toe with anyone in the world on this, because you're just wrong if you think it. We have to teach them that there are consequences for not doing work. Well, like, they're going to learn that in life regardless, but like, now is not the time to focus on that. This is the most ridiculous premise that I've ever heard. Well, instead of focusing on learning math, we're going to focus on teaching them a lesson for not doing their work that may or may not have been important because it wasn't at their level of current mastery. That's ridiculous. You're just wrong, so stop it. So it just doesn't make any sense. School should be thinking and talking about things like responsibility and consequences. Yes, I agree from a holistic perspective. Those things should be discussed, but those are not the things that should be detrimental to a student's success. Because here's the truth. If a student doesn't do any work but aces the test, it doesn't matter that they didn't do any of their work because they already knew what they needed to know. So it's not about them doing their work on time. It's not about giving them a 0 because they didn't do their homework and they have to learn how to do homework. These are ridiculous premises. They are outdated. So if you want to teach 100 years ago, go sign up for a job fair 100 years ago because you're going to get hired real quick. But it's right now. And if you still think that way, if you've said one of those things this year, you're wrong and you need to stop it because it doesn't make any sense. So we need to stop just punishing students for like not doing work and instead finding out maybe why the work's not being done, finding out where they're confused. And that's really where that holistic mastery-based approach to feedback and support really comes in. And that's why that 3rd pillar becomes so important, because when you team it up with universal access and asynchronous learning, it really becomes a powerful environment.
That was, I was laughing. I apologize that I'm laughing, but like, I'm laughing because before we went on, you guys don't know, before we went on, like Chad's like, so what exactly like are we good? I'm like, don't worry, I'm just gonna ask you questions and let you go. Because that's like my favorite Chad is when you just get him going. So this is just like, yeah. Anyway, however, we do have an issue right now, Chad, that we have to tackle. And that's the fact that I'm still seeing a lot more people watching than we have likes and reactions. So like, I'm not okay with that. So can you like give us a like, give us a heart, give us a Twitter thing, whatever. If you're on YouTube, let us know you're there. Anyway, Eric says grades won't matter 20 years from now. The skills will. Yeah, focus on the skills, not the grades.
100%, Eric. 100%.
It's a big shift. So I like it. So all right, so we covered. All right, now I'm seeing some love coming on Twitter. So thanks for. I'm seeing a whole bunch of hearts. I'm liking it, different color ones. That's what we want to see. So, I do want to say right now, like Facebook's definitely dominating. We got quite a few on Twitter, but Facebook group and page are dominating right now. We got just a couple hanging out on Twitch and on YouTube. So I love it. Michelle, good morning, Michelle, who just jumped in here, and Randy, good morning to Randy up there. Michelle says, "Thank you. Stop with negative feedback."
So that's.
Go ahead. Go.
Sorry. So Michelle. So Michelle just made a really good point in terms of stopping with negative or punitive feedback. However, that doesn't mean we have to quote unquote go easy on our students, because a lot of times people go, well, if you're never punishing them with grades, you're going easy on their students. Where if you're implementing mastery learning properly, you will actually get more work out of your students. They'll have to work harder because they actually have to demonstrate that they know something. The problem is in a traditional, archaic, old style traditional classroom from 1908, it doesn't matter if the student actually knows anything as long as they filled in the blanks, did the work, studied, crammed, and forgot all the information the next day. And it really stops mattering about anything because it becomes a game. So many students have just learned the game of school, and we have to change the rules so that they can get back to learning the game of learning and loving getting additional information and learning how to do new things and acquiring new skills, because that's truly what education is about. Education is never about passing a test. It's about demonstrating mastery and skills that a test shows. And if I'm a teacher right now, the one question you can ask yourself beyond the 3 pillars is it the test that matters or the information and the skills on the test? Because if it's the test that matters, you're thinking about it wrong. It's what have they demonstrated that they know from the assignment, from the task, from the quiz, from the test, from whatever I'm asking that student to do. What am I truly asking them to know? Because here's the truth. If a student comes up to me and goes, I don't want to take this test, it shouldn't mean that they have to fail. If I can simply go, okay, well, this test was supposed to show X, Y, and Z. Can you demonstrate that in a different way besides taking this test? Because if you can, it doesn't matter if they took the test.
Agreed. I'm loving the comments coming in. Aaron says consequences for not completing work is often because you feel like you have to get back at them for not doing what you as a teacher said to do. And it worked before, it'll continue to work mind frame. And I think it continues. And we talk a lot about, if you still think your job as a teacher is to stand up and deliver content, you've been replaced by a phone, right? If you don't understand that there's been a shift in your role as an educator. And I love, you said it something earlier. You said a statement and you said, that doesn't mean that the teacher's not still important. And that's like the biggest thing is like, I think when we take away the stand and deliver at the front of the room, content deliverer, and we say that's not your job anymore, they feel like, oh, I'm not important anymore. No, like your job's even more important in my opinion, because you are the facilitator learning. They can go learn. There's literally nothing you can give them that they can't go Google, literally, except for you, right? Except for you and your personality. But what we need to be teaching them and really educating them on is, great, you have access to unlimited information, but how do you actually learn? How do you actually go find the right sources? How do you pick apart things and actually, you talk about students go learn almost everything they learn from YouTube, but how do you go to the right YouTube, right? How do you find the right thing? So like, it's this facilitation of learning. How do I get the base knowledge to do it? So I think it's a big shift. This continues to be the shift of like, my role as a teacher has changed. It's more important than ever though.
Yeah, I think you said it really well. If you think your role as a teacher is to give students information, first of all, anyone can disseminate information. It's not hard. If I know something, I can tell it to someone else. But furthermore, if I'm just telling you information, everything I'm saying has been replaced by something that fits in your pocket. What we need to do is get around to pedagogy. And that is the art and the craft of facilitating learning so it happens. So someone asked, how do we get around district requirements for common assessments? That every student shows mastery on the exact same assessment. So I don't want to demonize common assessments, because I actually think having common language targets and essential mastery questions that all students have to meet is a great idea. However, having every student on a Tuesday take the same test, whether they're ready or not, doesn't necessarily make sense. But if you created a bank of mastery questions that students have to be able to answer, and they can answer in multiple different ways, you could take every item on that common assessment. If it's well designed, you could scaffold them based on DOK, and you can use those questions or those common assessment items to drive that learning and to drive that assessment of actual mastery, versus everyone has to take the common assessment because the district says it's on this Friday. Like, that just doesn't make any sense, because every class is going to move at a different pace naturally. So with common assessments, they're not necessarily a bad idea. Having a common goal and objectives for a set subject area, we actually work with districts on that all the time. That's not necessarily a bad idea at all. However, allowing flexibility of going back to the pillars, when students take that assessment, how they demonstrate mastery, and do they have universal access so that if I'm ready, I can take it early or a portion. I've also had people break up the district common assessment and they release parts of it as opposed to this giant test at the end. When a student learns something, has demonstrated mastery, they can quote unquote test out of that portion of the common assessment. There's a lot of really creative things you can do. So to the question, I don't know who it was based on the response, but that's how I think you can get around common assessments in their traditional sense and have a little bit more flexibility to instill these 3 pillars.
I'm liking it. All right. So I think we touched on 3 pillars. We've elaborated a little bit. We're going to hang out for a few more minutes. I want to make sure if anybody has any questions, they can throw them in the comments. We'll address it right now. I did want to mention, we mentioned the grid webinar, that series that's going on, starts next week on Tuesday. If you go to teachbetter.com/grid webinar, you can sign up for that. It is a paid one, but with your registration, you get access to all 8 live events with Chad, and then which are going to happen on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time. They're going to be an hour long. And then you're also going to get access to the replays, which will have access for life, which will be stored in a course over at teachbetteracademy.com. So you'll get all the replays as well. And then including that, you're going to get there's a bunch of example grids, templates, PDF version of the grid workbook that we utilize, and all of that as well. So there's quite a bit that comes with that. It's going to be really cool walkthrough of how to create the grid, and then some opportunity to ask Chad a lot of different questions and do some analyzing of grids live and stuff like that too. So I did want to share that. Make sure people had that in their head as well. So we got some comments coming in. Let's see if we got anything. Let's see. I think that was Carrie asking that question.
Don Apps from Rocket Nation joining us. I'm actually working with him and his staff tomorrow. So
that is tomorrow.
And that's actually something that we've been doing is converting our own workshops to be able to survive an e-learning environment. So this is a process for everyone, even the Teach Better team.
It really has been. Aaron, at $75 gets you all that for the grid. So it's actually the cheapest we've ever done any sort of grid workshop for.
Yeah. So Alex just brought up a really, really great point. And depending on the point or the purpose of the common assessment, so if the purpose of the common assessment is to help a student continue to grow and assess their individual learning, that is really, really that is where some of the things I said I think come into play the most. What Alex is saying is sometimes you just want to see how are the students doing in 2nd grade on these skills as an entire team or as entire grade level. That is a perfect example. Alex, thank you so much for bringing that up, of when common assessments are for data collection so that you can adjust instruction or adjust things accordingly, or even using them as determinants of where you're going to go next. So I think from that standpoint, from a PLC standpoint, from a team discussion and data analysis standpoint, common assessments in their traditional form do, however, have a very strong role in those things. So Alex, thank you for bringing that up.
I also want to throw another link on the screen, teachbetter.com/webinar series. We are in the mix still of our 6-week, 12-part free webinar series. So that's 100% free, and you also get the recordings as well. We had some amazing ones. Ray kicked us off with the essentials of remote learning. Then we went into Kevin Butler, or Chad did one we did a week of the grid method and remote learning. Kevin Butler last week blew all of our minds with how to end the year strong, even in remote learning. We are in a mix. Yesterday was amazing. We had a great group of educators who on a holiday joined us with Jennifer and Hans Apple to talk about meaningful celebrations in the classroom. Next week, Mandy Freilich is talking to us about educator mental health. And then you and Ray are kind of wrapping everything up the week after that with how do we get ready and instruct in the new normal. So this is a 6-week, 12-part series, 100% free. You get all access to the course for life as well. You can sign up now and you'll get access to all the previous sessions recorded. And then I obviously have access to that. Those happen on Monday and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. But again, it's all recorded and stuff too. So I wanted to throw that as well. We have some more. We have some Dave giving some advice to Carrie in there, so appreciate that, Dave. Adam says have a great day, day, everyone. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate you always chiming in. Aaron says it's important not to over-assess when it feels like there's no teaching because it's all assessing. Go ahead, Chad.
So if your feedback is holistic and focused on growth, assessment becomes a natural part of the learning process, and feedback becomes a natural part of the learning process. So I don't necessarily, because grid method classrooms that we work with across the country assess more than any classroom we've ever been in. Like, I guarantee you they are assessing 10 times more. However, the students buy into it because it's growth-focused, mastery-based feedback. So when we adjust how we deliver and the purpose of feedback, I think the worry of over-assessment lowers a little bit. And now the assessment and the feedback has more of a purpose.
Yeah, I love it. All right, if you're listening on the podcast, do me a favor, hit subscribe, give us a rating review. Appreciate that. If you're on YouTube, hit subscribe, hit like, leave us a comment. If you're on Twitter, you can retweet this out to anyone you think that might need to hear this. Same with on Facebook, you can share it out. We really appreciate y'all being in there. If you are on listening anywhere, watching anywhere, and you're not already in our private Facebook group, you should really get in there. It's amazing and really active. A lot of amazing educators in there, over 4,000 from all over the world, always sharing and stuff and supporting each other. You can go to teachbettergroup.com for that, or just search Teach Better Team on Facebook. Make sure you go to teachbetter.com/grid webinar if you want to get into that 4-week, 8-part series with Chad on building a grid. Or if you want to still take advantage of the free webinar series going on right now, teachbetter.com/webinar series. So really important. Love everyone jumping in here and commenting. We appreciate y'all our early morning. And if you need anything, reach out. You know where we are at. We're at Teach Better Team on everything. So we appreciate y'all. Chad, thanks for jumping on early with me and just letting me push you in and go. So
you're the best way to start my day, buddy.
You know what? Right here, buddy. Right here. I miss you. You know, we spent the first 3 years of this business traveling all over together all day, every day. It was nuts. And now it's like, I miss you, Chad. Yeah, I can't say it any other way. Appreciate you. We need to get some wings. I agree. So Martin, I appreciate you as well. So appreciate everyone. Have a fantastic. Hey, there's Van jumping in. How's Florida, buddy?
We'll talk to him later.
Anyway, awesome to see everyone. Have an amazing day. Thank you.